Hello, welcome again to Sport Unlocked. Joining me, Rob Harris from Sky News as ever, Martyn Ziegler from The Times, and Tariq Panja from The New York Times. And so much to get into with the fallout from the chaos at the Copa America final in Miami and the racism involving Argentina. Also, Olympic doping. But first, we begin at the Euros final, where Tariq and myself had a bit of an insight into a chaotic incident ourselves when we bumped into someone who's been slightly disruptive figure at various sports awards, sports events recently.
I've only recently realised who this person is through the Euros, and it's a fellow called Speed, or hang on, I think I've got his real name, guys. Darren Jason Watkins Jr.
IShowSpeed.
Is he that Manchester United fan sort of thing?
Yeah, Manchester United convert, maybe. Cristiano Ronaldo, acolyte. And suddenly thrust into the world of football in many different ways.
So, set the scene. We're about 2 hours from kick-off, England's final against Spain, and in the media entrance, in quite a narrow top of a staircase, suddenly quite a commotion with someone rushing in with a couple of heavies.
Couple of heavies? They were like 4 heavies rolled into 2. These guys were absolutely enormous. They come bustling through the press entrance, causing absolute chaos. And they were saying, we have to come in here for this guy's security. And I didn't quite understand what was happening, Rob.
Just take a listen to some of this.
Not a journalist. Not a journalist. Yes, but you're not media. Yes, he's not journalist, but too much people come. You know, I'll stay here for 1 minute. That's his business, though, isn't it? Yeah, but for safety. What? He does this for business. Of course people are going to come. For safety.
But he needs crowds, doesn't he, to get me popular?
I understand that,
But we're trying to do it the safe way.
What's the safe way?
I said we're trying to do it the safe way. That's what we're trying to do.
What is it safe? Trying to be safe. What's the safe way?
I said we're trying to do it the safe way. That's what I said we're trying to get to. I'm trying to get to my seat the safe way. That's what I'm trying to do.
Which seats are you in?
What's it?
That's what we're working on right now, as you can see. That's all I'm trying to do. All right? Yeah, okay, so don't try to start a problem. All I'm trying to do is just get to my seat. You said I'm trying to do this for a purpose reason. I'm just trying to get to my seat. You're sure you're so final.
What
I'm
is his business?
famous.
Sorry.
Just because I'm famous.
No, he's trying to get to his seat. That's why I'm trying So security brought us in here, and you started squaring up and following him. You did.
No, we're just intrigued by the whole.
How about start squaring up?
So that was the incident as it was unfolding. If he is being mobbed by crowds, then he had to find somewhere to escape in a press entrance.
You could make that point, you could. But then if you see his shtick, if you see his content, which I did after that incident, this guy, his fame is kind of built on creating a mob scene, creating an effect of being chased by loads of people. So I assume, as I said to him, I think that's his business. That's what he does. Now, the rest of our working days are being disrupted by this man is another question. But if you look at what he does, he creates the mayhem, creates the crowd, and that is his line of work.
I suppose we could be accused of creating content out of it, just as he creates content as well.
No, yeah, absolutely. I just think it's fascinating to the broader point of, individual content creators and if you want, influencers and the like, and their increasing kind of convergence into the world of sport, into football in this case, and the allure that sponsors and even the organizations like UEFA probably have. I mean, this guy is followed, or his information has been consumed by 20 billion people, according to the data that his people have put out. I don't know whether that's true, but he clearly has a following. Now, if you're UEFA or the IOC and these event companies, this is a new audience, and this is a potential kind of cash cow for sponsors as well, isn't it?
As well.
Yeah, right. Just on this is what I find fascinating as well. Like the clubs, Cristiano Ronaldo, I saw last week. It's Zlatan Ibrahimovic, where he's at AC Milan, had brought him in. And what this is, I think, is an example of the network effect. So AC Milan, very famous. Zlatan Ibrahimovic, really famous. Ronaldo, ditto. And this guy, very famous. You multiply these things together, you have this enormous audience that you're trying to reach together.
He's American, I think, isn't he? Speed. So interesting that he thinks football is where it's at, but clearly it is.
And it's got the whole build up to the 2026 World Cup to boost his profile even more. So this unfolded a few hours before England's defeat to Spain in the Euros final. Then it wasn't the only final that day because, of course, the Copa America was concluding with Argentina taking on Colombia in Miami. And while we're all digesting the fallout from the Spanish victory in Berlin, that we learnt of the mayhem unfolding at the Hard Rock Stadium in Miami. A huge delay, fans trying to get in, and quite reminiscent in some ways of the Euros final at Wembley 3 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at some of the images and video clips that have come out of that, fans, trying every way without tickets to get into the stadium. I've seen videos of people sort of breaking in through sort of passageways. And also the ramifications of that is that lots of fans with tickets were sort of kept outside, very, very hot, and quite considerable numbers weren't even able to get in.
Yeah, the similarities in some way between what happened in the Euros were there, but this felt like on an entire different scale, and that was awful what happened at Wembley in 2021. And the other similarities were this has happened at other games in the tournament, so it had been coming. I got emails after writing about this on Monday, and several people talked about dangerous situations across the tournament. Now, this is a CONMEBOL event, as everyone is very keen to point out, not a FIFA event. However, this, as far as the world is concerned, we don't know, most people in the world don't know the intricacies. They know that the US is going to hold a 2026 Football World Cup, and they're seeing these big football events marred by this type of thing. But extremely dangerous.
And maybe surprising because this is a stadium that's hosting NFL matches. It's been staging the Formula One race as well. So it is used to major events, but maybe not of the type that have such a passionate crowd wanting to get into the signature match of the year.
What other events are you going to have people sort of risking turning up at the stadium without a ticket, or just on the off chance they might be able to get in, or if not get in, just to savour the atmosphere? That is going to happen in the World Cup in 2026. And if FIFA aren't prepared for that, then they really need to be.
And of course, FIFA are organising this. They've taken control of the organising of the World Cup. So a contrast is the Euros that have just been in Germany. At one point, UEFA actually sanctioned and fined Germany as the co-organiser for fan issues in the stadium, not even involving Germany. But it really is all on FIFA's plate when it comes to 2026, given the way they have taken over the organisation.
Yeah, so this is the new model. No more local organising committees. This is up to FIFA and the people they have, both in those offices in Coral Gables in Miami and Zurich, to put this together. And the US is very complicated. Obviously, we've talked about, this is a federation, so different state laws, local laws, and putting all that together is not going to be easy. The fallout from this, though, has also been interesting. I think CONMEBOL put out quite a strange statement saying that the host stadium, Hard Rock Stadium's owners, they didn't put out the security plan as designed. And then obviously Hard Rock Stadium said, hang on a minute, that's a load of nonsense, and have fought back. But, that's all after the show, though, isn't it? A lot of people, Rob, Martyn, have spent thousands of dollars, and forget the money, just for that moment. To be in the stadium for a game like this, it doesn't come around a lot.
Well, let's get the view now from Miami. Joining us is the AFP sports writer Simon Evans, who was at the final on Sunday. Simon, welcome to Sport Unlocked.
Good to be here, Rob. How are you doing?
All good, thanks. But it wasn't too good on Sunday. How concerned were you witnessing those scenes, and how did they develop?
Yeah, it was very concerning. It started off with I popped outside from the press box and looked down to the area, one of the areas where the problem was, and it was noticeable that fans were still locked out, well after the time when the gates were supposed to have been opened, and there were also, some police grappling somebody to the ground, and you start to think like, well, that's somebody without a ticket who's got in, or something's going on. So went down to investigate that, and it just, it was clear it was a serious situation around the stadium that began to develop, where they couldn't open the gates because they were getting rushed every time they opened the gates. And so that meant there was a massive buildup of people outside the stadium and all the sort of problems that come with that. Yeah, it was a total failure on the part of the security system that was put in place for that game.
So like reporting it in the moment, we've both been there in the past as well, in terms of decoding statements, getting reaction from authorities and telling that first draft in terms of what's happening, where the culpability might be.
Yeah, it's quite interesting to have those two things going on at the same time, where you're down there, you're looking at what's happening in front of you, and it started to get quite bad. During the sort of couple of hours that it was going on, you started to see when they did let people come through. Some of them were, in a pretty bad state. I saw women sort of collapsing really, and people lying down on the floor and needing to have water poured on their head. Not much medical support at all, really. There were some paramedics dealing with some of the worst cases. And then the statements are arriving on your phone while you're in the middle of this saying, we urge fans not to turn up without tickets. And it's like, that was the statement you should have been making yesterday.
We've got a voice note here, haven't we?
Yes, from Maura Bendeschi, an Argentine fan who lives in Mexico, her husband and 2 young children.
We arrived at the stadium about 90 minutes before the game was supposed to start. Walking a couple of blocks to the stadium was normal, lots of people, lots of excitement. But when we got to the gates were closed, and that was confusing. Many people already gathering at the door, and many people arriving after me, hundreds and thousands of people arriving. So we asked around, they said all the gates are closed because before some people were trying to get into the stadium without tickets and they were resolving that situation. But very quickly we thought that the situation wasn't good. In many occasions we saw what happens with closed gates at stadiums. So, and with small kids, we couldn't stay there. So we decided to not stay at the gates, just move half a block and just wait in an area which was more quiet, more, open. I thought it was going to be a question of minutes, but time passed, half hour, an hour. They started to say that the game was going to be postponed, and about an hour and a half after we arrived, they started to do this opening and close of the gates. But no one was scanning the tickets. It was just like avalanches of people running. The police were shouting to the people as they entered. And of course, there were people with tickets and without tickets pushing to get into the gates. As they opened the doors, quickly they tried to close the doors with the people trying to get inside, which was very scary.
So sounds really distressing from what we just heard there. And obviously Argentina did win the match eventually 1-0. And any surprise the game actually then did go ahead? It was really delayed, wasn't it? But then I suppose the dangers, if you suddenly send everyone away, it can create other issues.
Yeah, so the decision they made so that the game could go ahead was basically to open the gates. And one of the security staff there who I'd been talking to throughout the process, who was doing a really sterling job, but also being very good with the media and sort of, being quite open in a sort of off the record way about what had gone on and what had gone wrong. After having his team spend 3 hours pushing back a crowd, keeping a gate locked, and then trying to let a few individuals through each time, and then pushing the gate again to make sure they don't get rushed. All that effort and stress that his people had gone through, and then they just opened the gate and let them all in anyway, which was quite extraordinary. And there were no checks on those people who came in. Now, you immediately think about tickets and you think, okay, well, they're taking the decision that if there's a few hundred or 1,000 people in the stadium who are going to be sat on the or standing room only, not in seats and everything. That's not the end of the world. But as some Americans were very quick to point out on social media, in the American context, letting people in without checks can mean a lot more than just getting in without a ticket, because obviously people, have weapons in this country, and there was no checking about whether any of those people who got in had knives or even, guns. It was quite extraordinary that happened. But once it happened, the game was going to take place, and it did, like 90 minutes late.
And I suppose until this point, there hadn't really been many questions raised about the US part of the 2026 World Cup. Obviously, it's also being co-hosted by Canada and particularly Mexico, where perhaps there's been a focus on how safe it would be there. Is this now starting to focus minds? In the US, is there much coverage on those 2026 concerns? We know if this was a UK event, that certainly a lot of the domestic media would turn focus on how safe would things be for the major tournament coming up.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of issues that have come out of Copa America for 2026. Now, FIFA are keen to let people know that they'll be running the World Cup, not CONMEBOL, and FIFA standards around security at stadiums are far better. They use perimeter fences. You wouldn't have a situation like Sundays if it had been under the FIFA system, as it were. Same with the issue about the fields, where the grass fields put on top of the artificial surfaces have been quite poor and were criticised by coaches. And again, FIFA are like, we give ours time to bed in. It's going to take longer. It'll be a different story at the World Cup. So a lot of people are sort of thinking, well, FIFA will take care of this. But there are problems with NFL stadiums that just aren't used to hosting these kind of games, because it's not NFL fans who turn up. You never hear of NFL fans trying to storm the entrance of a stadium. They just never enter their head. It's a totally different culture. The idea that there's no segregation inside the stadiums, that was a problem in Charlotte at the semi-final, where I saw those scenes with Darwin Núñez wading in and Colombia and Uruguay fans fighting with each other. Again, doesn't happen in American sports. So there's a lot of things need to be addressed. And of course, the weather has been extremely hot, and will be, it's the same time of year that the World Cup will be held in. So there's a lot of issues.
That takes us, I suppose, to looking at the recent World Cups past. Qatar, a big focus on heat. Brazil and South Africa on security. So if we look at the US, you've just mentioned how hot it is, and it will be potentially during the World Cup. Then, in the last week alone, an assassination attempt on the former president and current presidential candidate Donald Trump. Now, we've covered past World Cup build-ups. Could you imagine if this had been in some other countries? Do you think there would have been a lot more questions about the sudden suitability of them as a host?
Yeah, I think there would be, Rob, to be honest. I think there are issues over here that need to be addressed. There's a whole range of issues that just people don't tend to focus on. I mean, the absence really of a public transport system around most of these cities. Things are going to be put in place, shuttle buses and so on. But the fallback option, people have complained about Deutsche Bahn at the Euros. Good luck finding a way to get to a football match by train in America. There's almost hardly any cities where you'll be able to do that outside of maybe New York, New Jersey. So there's loads of issues over here. The security one, the stadiums, the heat. The heat. People say, well, a lot of these NFL stadiums are roofed and air conditioned, so it'll be like Qatar in that sense. But the training grounds aren't. If it's 100 degrees in Houston for a match, fine, the match will be all right. But the days building up to the game and the crowds outside will still be dealing with that. There's loads of issues. But on the security front, I think, yeah, you're right. The assassination attempt, and then that coming around the same time as a stadium security meltdown, really just raise some really important questions. And his question is, is the media really being fair if they're applying that kind of scrutiny to somewhere like South Africa or Brazil, but not to the United States in the same extent?
And all the time we wait to discover what happened to the FIFA council member Ramon Jesseron, the Colombian FA president, who was arrested at the final.
Given that thing was so big, this would have been huge news on its own. The president of the Colombian FA, a member of the FIFA council, the organizer of the tournament, he had that role within CONMEBOL. Him and his son end up being arrested and spending the night in jail after having fights with security staff in the stadium after the game. I mean, I don't know where that fits in with the whole day of chaos, but that's really significant. Now, presumably FIFA and CONMEBOL are going to be investigating him, and it's it's hard to think that he can stay on in his role if he did assault security staff.
FIFA haven't said anything, have they?
No, and is that rare for FIFA? I don't know these days. We've talked about FIFA communications, but it's a significant thing that a member of your council has spent a night in the cells for essentially punching a security guard.
Yeah, that was sort of the cherry on the cake of the whole thing, wasn't it? Really, yeah. So we'll see what happens with that. But there was, there were a lot of people got caught up in those incidents on Sunday. I mean, that was the most dramatic example of it. But there were people I know personally from CONCACAF who couldn't get into the stadium because once they'd opened the gates and let people in, if you were the person who said, I'm not going to get involved in a stampede, I'm just going to wait till it calms down and then I'll walk in, they closed the gates to those people. So there were actually people from CONCACAF texting me and saying, we can't get in. And they were, to some extent, the co-hosts of the tournament.
Well, certainly many issues now in the build-up to 2026 that have sharpened the minds. And, of course, the Club World Cup due to be in the United States next year. Simon, thank you for joining us from Miami.
You're welcome anytime.
Simon Evans, based there in Miami for the AFP news agency. Well, that's the game itself, but there was more controversy in the celebrations as their Copa America victory and Enzo Fernández, the Chelsea player, live streaming offensive chant. It features homophobic, racist lyrics, and he was broadcasting it himself and now facing disciplinary action from FIFA. Also say they're investigating. But this seemed to really test football's commitment to zero tolerance. How quick is it to announce action? How quick is it to put out statements condemning? Obviously, while respecting that, there obviously needs to be a full process.
This is an incredible story. It's had international repercussions, continues to a sort of massive talking point in Argentina. The song is directed at France. It makes sort of offensive mockery of France's players with African backgrounds, says they're all from Angola, they've got a Nigerian father, Cameroonian mother, and some very nasty homophobic stuff as well. This was a song that Argentina fans started singing in 2022 at the World Cup. So for the players to know the words of that and sing it, I think that's pretty shocking.
It wouldn't be surprising to know the lyrics. I mean, in different scenarios, I've spent a lot of time around fans in recent weeks at the Euros. I hear a lot of the offensive chants. You know them actually to make sure you don't broadcast lines and you tell people to not use lines. So to know it isn't the thing, but obviously to repeat it, to actually sing it yourself, you know the lines it's building up to. And then to blame the emotion of the occasion.
Yeah, you weren't joining in with any songs about German aircraft from the Second World War then, Rob?
No, and that's something we did hear at times from England fans across the travels in Germany.
Yeah, on the point of the apologies and the like, the French Football Association demanded that the Argentinians take note of this and made a formal complaint with FIFA on this. Don't forget, Enzo Fernández plays in London with Chelsea, with many French people and also many black players. There's been instant condemnation from them and beyond as well. There's an investigation at Chelsea. But in Argentina, Martin, they seem to have taken the complete opposite tack, haven't they?
Yeah, the far-right government has come out very strongly in support of what Argentina's Copa America winning team. So, I mean, not all of them. The deputy sports minister, Julio Garro, he suggested on a radio station that Messi should apologise publicly because it reflected very badly on Argentina.
Because he's the captain.
A few hours later, the president of Argentina sacks him, says, he should never, how dare he criticise Messi for this? And he actually also retweeted a tweet saying that the song was just telling the truth. This is the president of Argentina saying that. And then you had the vice president going even further. Just remarkable things saying we are not a country of colonists. No one tells us what to do.
This as a song is an attack on the successful multiculturalism reflected in the French team, isn't it?
Yeah, which is, as Martyn described the lyrics there, and that's a great example of cohesion in a world in which it's sorely lacking at the moment. And comments from the likes of the Argentine government there, you could argue, seek to sow division.
It does come back to this zero tolerance phrase, which is never really applicable because you do have to carry out a process. Gianni Infantino has said nothing. He often does react after instances in matches. Interestingly, one thing pointed out from within Chelsea why they were pretty slow to react and why they still, at the time of recording, haven't named him directly in a statement or called it racism. Initially, they're saying they had to check it was real, the video. And we do see AI videos. We've seen AI recreations of Gareth Southgate press conferences during the Euros as well. So essentially have to check that it is definitely him, but it became clear it was him because I can imagine if something like that was being spread that wasn't real, you'd soon know about it and want to distance yourself from it and show it's false.
Well, he's apologised as well in his statements. Quite bizarre in that sense. He said they caught up in the emotion, and almost the words just came tumbling out of his mouth in the emotion. But that is not who he is. But arguably, that is exactly who he is because that's what he said. I think once you're caught out, you then go through the process of apology, don't you?
An apology that disappeared after 24 hours. It was posted on Insta stories.
Oh, it's like Gianni stuff as well. That sometimes on the Insta stories you've talked about, and that stuff exactly, so it doesn't stain. This
Surely
person.
you've got to promote your apology has to be in the very same form, out of your own mouth, rather than being in a written statement.
Especially given the gravity of it, and it's his friends and teammates at home as much as the rest of the world. The teammates at Chelsea are genuinely upset and sad about this. And guys, we were in Bangkok. We were in Bangkok for the FIFA Congress. That Rob's point about Gianni Infantino and zero, that was the main kind of apex point of that last FIFA Congress, the fight against racism. FIFA made a big point about that. And this is a great test.
Yeah, the ball is very much in FIFA's court on that. And it's, you've talked the talk, now walk the walk. Let's see what they do. Demba Ba, the former Chelsea and Newcastle and Senegal, he did I thought it was a really good tweet in response to what Argentina have said, in which he says, "Land of asylum for former Nazis on the run. From 1945, Peron hosted war criminals, and it surprises you?" So I thought that was quite a good response.
We've seen in the past that when players are asked to produce the solutions for racism, that very often there's a wait for action and it is left to the players to call it out. I mean, we had it with Wesley Fofana, the Chelsea player, on Monday night, didn't we? He was the one who was condemning it.
Yeah, sure, exactly. And obviously, so he obviously feels wounded by this, and quite rightly, and others have too. But in terms of the authorities, this kind of thing has to be dealt with properly, because it will just happen again and again. And the other question is, it's such a bizarre industry, this, because if it's any normal walk of life, the condemnation is there, the punishment's there, and then you probably don't want an employee who's going to be racist. But these footballers, they're assets, aren't they? Enzo Fernández, he costs £100 million. Chelsea aren't going to say, right, see you later, pal. That's above the line. You got to go. This is the kind of bizarre economic balancing act they have to do when people misbehave.
So there are a few things to this. What should Chelsea do? And also at the FIFA level, is it even under their jurisdiction? It wasn't a FIFA match; it was a CONMEBOL match.
I think it must come under their jurisdiction somehow.
It does. There's FIFA statutes about discriminatory comments in football, not only at FIFA events. You can go through those. So there is a FIFA event. And also the French have written to FIFA to deal with it.
The point is you don't even have to be at a stadium, at a FIFA event. You can be punished for something well away from the stadium. Although, of course, you cases that they do choose to go after, and which individuals.
Oh, FIFA selective in terms of ethics cases. You shocked me, Rob.
And what about Chelsea? I mean, does it start and end with education? Do they fine him? Do they suspend him?
Chelsea were actually onto this. They were looking into this before Wesley Fofana sort of blew it sky high by his tweet saying football in 2024 uninhibited racism, and followed by, I think, at least two other and perhaps 5 other Chelsea teammates unfollowing Enzo Fernández on social media. So that's going to cause them problems for a start. So I think Chelsea will have to do something which satisfies the other players who are so offended. So I don't think they can just slap him on the wrist, can they?
Obviously, Fernandes will now be on his post-tournament break anyway, so perhaps wouldn't be linking up with his Chelsea teammates for another few weeks. It gives them some time to see how to take action or not. But let's go back to the Euros now. Obviously, quite 5 weeks. I was there throughout in Germany. Let's go, though, to the celebrations that took place in Madrid as the Spanish side celebrated their 4th European Cup. And one incident has caused a lot of controversy. It is the chants by Alvaro Morata and Rodri. They're chanting Gibraltar es Español. Gibraltar is Spanish. Now, not a dispute perhaps we often talk about, but of course, Spain does lay claim to Gibraltar, which is British territory.
Yeah, in fact, I think Spain were drawn against Gibraltar in the qualifying competition for Euro 2024, but it was because actually UEFA actually blocked them, so that can't take part. That couldn't actually happen. So that shows how sort of sensitive this issue is, and it really infuriated the Gibraltar FA.
Yeah, the Gibraltar FA called the chants extremely provocative and insulting. They're planning an official complaint. In the past, we have heard various chants. I think at a Spain match against England, I think it must have been the Nations League in 2018. I heard some chants, and I remember asking UEFA at the time about it, but I don't think there was any action at all. It was a colleague at the time who certainly spoke Spanish who picked it up in the corner of his ear.
Yeah, this time it's the players chanting it, but you mentioned the Euros. This Euros has been interesting for chants about, sovereign territory, right? We talked about all those various fans from the Balkans talking about various homelands that are at the moment in other people's territory. Now you have the players talking about this. And in terms of Rodri, I think the commentator on the television in Spain made the point of, hang on a minute, this guy's going to go. He's going to have to go back to England for work.
It might surprise them that Gibraltar isn't talked about a lot. It wasn't exactly up ahead of this final. Not even the England fans who will always perhaps quickly adopt some sort of goading cause weren't exactly chanting it in the face of Spanish fans at all. Obviously, it's seen as something of a touch point more for Spanish players, with perhaps Spain believing that they have every right to that territory rather than it being a British overseas territory.
To me, I'm amazed that footballers could even sort of think that's something even worth chanting about. But maybe the surge of patriotism and nationalism from sort of delivering a trophy for your country sort of takes over.
And it's that nationalism that we did hear a lot about at the Euros. There's territorial disputes, the Balkan War being revived by chants and flags and various issues throughout the Euros, really, that we did witness. A very political Euros that did end, though, pretty successfully, you've got to say. A lot of concerns maybe about widespread fan disorder and unrest with the first big massing of football fans in Europe since Euro 2016, but largely a success, but not really much of a victory lap by UEFA, in part because they don't hold press conferences. So a missed opportunity, maybe.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, for me, the Euros is a story about the public and the fans. Just the sheer colour and spectacle. Almost every game, every team had this huge number of travelling supporters there, and that carnival atmosphere, massive events. The quality of the football is quite average, most people would say, based on people who are wiser than us when it comes to what's happening.
Is that because it's so now everyone's at the end of a long season, will only get worse maybe with expanded Champions League and Europa Leagues as well in the men's game?
Maybe that, but also the kind of largely defensive approach from a lot of the coaches at the tournament. But just to point out let's think about the Scots, the Dutch, the Georgians, the Turkish fans, England fans as well, huge numbers, and on and on. It was spectacular, and I think Germany were good hosts. And
Gianni Infantino wasn't at the Euros final, was he? He was actually in India at a wedding.
The wedding of the year. This is the Ambani wedding. Lots of other people, everyone you can possibly think of who might be some sort of the Kardashians, Tony Blair, Boris Johnson, and of course Gianni Infantino, dancing, mingling. I mean, this wedding, I'm sure everyone's heard about it. It's costing like hundreds of millions of pounds. We've got rock bands, pop stars. Is it strange they would go to that and not go to either the Copa or the Euros, or could he say, "Oh well, I couldn't go to both, so maybe I shouldn't go to either"?
See if he is a close family friend. Why would want to be with them at their celebrations? The Copa America final, though, a big test event ahead of the World Cup in 2026. You've got to see it as well.
You do in Miami, where he's said to be living now in his hometown. And look, this idea that it would have been a kind of rejection of UEFA or CONMEBOL had I picked one, that just doesn't wash, does it? There is ways of doing this. You go to the opening ceremony of one of these tournaments and you go to the final of the other. But he's been to AFCON finals. What's the difference here? And then to the point of his friendliness or not with the Ambani family, I think as a leader of a football organization, this is a sport of the people. If you remember that start of Gianni Infantino's reign, he was going to be the normal president, that kind of distraction, easy jet flight to Cardiff and all of that. This seems to be a pattern of being around the very wealthy, the plutocrats of the world, if you want. And, we don't need to get into Salt Bay again, for example, and the gold leaf steaks. But this is the projection and the image. Martyn said, yes, the other people were there, but this guy was being hauled up, on a stage with an axe in his hand. He seemed to be a central figure. I mean, there is some, I would have thought there is some kind of modes of behavior once you were in that type of office, but maybe not. Maybe I'm old-fashioned.
Wasn't dancing getting into the full swing of things, showing he's being a good guest to his friends, and also even skipping a big football occasion? The fact that he was showing perhaps maybe loyalty to those he knows best, maybe very long-standing friends.
Well, I mean, there are sports connections with the Ambanis. Like, so Anand Ambani, the groom, his mother is Nita Ambani, who is a member of the International Olympic Committee, and looks like she's sort of very much driving the bid for a 2036 Olympic bid. Now, I think perhaps not surprising, other people from the world of sports politics who are there. Kirsty Coventry and Juan Antonio Samaranch Jr., both seen as potential successors to Thomas Bach, the IOC president. So I imagine Gianni Infantino would be in that same bracket in terms of...
Is he trying to be the IOC president as well?
Well, no, but I don't think so. But he's certainly somebody that's seen as being important.
They're also very rich. Now, FIFA always got it seems like the bucket out for a few more rupees in this case. And maybe there's a sponsorship or some sort of event that they're trying to sell. Who knows?
Yeah, it comes with the IOC as well, trying to maybe take an event to India. It's never had the Olympics. The end of the summer football tournament, though, at the same time as they were concluding, questioned by FIFA looking ahead to next year's big event, the club, or certainly something they hope will be a big event. I was actually around the UEFA hotel in Berlin as some of the promotion was being posted on social media. Interestingly, it's Gianni Infantino's picture that is promoting the event next year. And I suppose still no one really knows what this event will be like. Will it capture the public interest? Will it just seem like a extended friendly tournament, but at the end of a season that will already have seen World Cup qualifiers earlier in June before 24 teams head to the United States to play this newly expanded Men's Club World Cup that will serve as a warm-up for the 2026 World Cup? But we have had a few developments. They hoped to do this big global deal with Apple, didn't they? But they've had to put the rights out to tender this week to try to find some broadcasters who will show this event.
Yeah, desperate. I mean, what a situation. We're dragged on. We're less than a year from this tournament. What we don't know is, or we don't have, where the TV rights have been sold. The sponsorship scenario still not arranged. Still no stadiums or where these things are going to be hosted. So that means no idea of ticketing. I mean, the whole thing is up in the air. We got a word that there's going to be an announcement on the stadiums fairly soon, I guess. But what a shame, what a shambles so far for something that should be quite important for
Yeah, I mean,
FIFA.
obviously, it always takes time to build up interest in a new event, and perhaps it's not helped in English terms. The fact the only teams are Manchester City and Chelsea, maybe they would have helped by having a Manchester United or a Liverpool there. They do have Real Madrid, but no Barcelona going there because you qualify through recent Champions League success, which hasn't happened at Barcelona. So you've got a team like
Benfica are there. So it's a cross section of Europe.
And quite a platform, particularly for those clubs from outside Europe, as FIFA do push this making football truly global mission. Here's something though, when it was affirmed all the plans last December, they said the competition's official name will be Mundial de Club FIFA, using the Spanish. That's vanished. It's now Club World Cup in English still, and all the promotion.
Yeah, I think that was because there was a lot of pushback from the clubies. They were like, hang on a minute, we want to have a say in what this name is. We don't like it. So I think that's why that's the case.
Interesting. I mean, Tariq, you and I were talking to a sort of leading broadcasting figure in the Euros, who shall remain nameless. I mean, they were saying that they actually think, from a TV rights point of view, they thought it's not going to get that many eyeballs, and that they weren't interested at all.
Yeah, a very interesting conversation. Essentially, most of the games, according to this person, are worthless for a British broadcaster, but a handful maybe involving the English teams, but only in the kind of later stages, because they could be so lopsided that it would be quite hard to get that interest.
Obviously, this is mid-June as well, when you've got the build-up to Wimbledon as well. Of course, as well, the Women's Euros taking place next summer across June and July as well. So there is crossover with that. It's taking place in Switzerland.
And I mean, that's going to be on the BBC.
We're talking about endless football, endless competitions through the year. The football season's barely just finished in terms of the Women's Euros qualifiers, the men's Copa America and Euros, and we're already into pre-season, and still summer tours to come from various European clubs. One other bit of Chelsea news about the financial situation that's been developing about their compliance with the regulations, and this involves the Chelsea women's team.
Yeah, so do you remember the Chelsea selling their 2 hotels to a sister company a year ago, June the 29th last year? They did that to raise £76 million, which helped them over the line of the PSR thing. Well, this year they've sold the women's team to their parent, the holding company sold it to the parent company. And that is likely, we don't know how much money is involved, but it's likely to be a paper profit worth tens of millions of pounds. Now, Chelsea say they insist this isn't a PSR thing. This is just to separate the women's team from the men's team. But the timing seems a bit coincidental to me.
Why did it have to make a financial? Why did it need to be a financial transaction to separate them?
Well, yes, exactly. It wouldn't have to be. But I think my understanding is it is being looked at by the Premier League as an associated party transaction to assess the fair market value. And that means it's got to have a financial value of at least £1 million. If there was no financial value, they wouldn't look at it.
And Martyn, what's happening with you mentioned the hotels? That had been looked at, and is that cleared? And this PSR,
I don't think it has been cleared. More than a year afterwards.
So there's still those issues. It just, for me, the point here is this PSR and the clubs are doing everything they can to avoid. It just seems to me there should be other kind of metrics as well, because we're going to keep seeing this now. Chelsea's kind of at the extreme edge of some of this stuff, but we are going to just keep seeing these weird transactions. The rules need to have some other function beyond just financial.
A search to attempt to comply this in the week that the plans for an independent football regulator were revived by Keir Starmer's new government after not being able to be passed in time into when Rishi Sunak's Conservative government called the election. One other bit of Premier League news too is over Lucas Paquetá, who's facing that FA investigation into alleged betting breaches. As the case unfolds, it seems so he can continue playing for West Ham.
Yeah, I mean, we knew he was going to be eligible to play, as he played for Brazil in the Copa America. what's happened now is that it appears that he is going to effectively be able to play for West Ham for the whole of next season, and potentially longer than that, because it's going to take that long. And I think his defence team will do everything they can to delay the hearing until at least in of next season. I mean, I'm not surprised at doing that. I mean, he could be banned for 10 years, so they'll want to put that off as long as possible. Huh?
He could be banned for life.
I suppose, yes, that's right. He could be.
So does that mean he could be wearing a shirt branded with a betting sponsor while under investigation for potential match fixing for the entire season? What a funny look that would be.
Spot fixing rather than match fixing, we should make clear. So it was just getting deliberately booked.
Yeah, that's the allegation. I mean, we've had it before. Ivan Toney played while being investigated by the FA before he was banned playing for Brentford, wasn't he?
Yeah, so that was for placing bets. I think spot fixing is a more serious allegation. So that's perhaps why people are sort of eyebrows raised about this being able to take place. But I suppose, you have to say innocent until proven guilty, which maybe that is the sort of justification. I mean, West Ham, I guess, they will be happy with that, because this is a guy, an asset, which should have been worth 85 million to them. That's his release clause, and that value sort of disappeared overnight, didn't it?
No, and also he's a great player. Those points are, why do you play football? He's a very valuable football player for West Ham, and their fans probably happy that he's there. It wouldn't be the first Premier League case to drag on for several years either, would it?
No, yes, that's true, actually. I can't think of any others, but in the back of my mind there's some. I mean, in Brazil, Tariq, Rob, there's a sort of different view of Lucas Paquetá. There's lots of sympathy for him. They think he's been a bit hard done by. They can't believe that he's facing this lifetime ban.
I suppose in some ways it depends how you're framing it, your views of integrity issues in the game, doesn't it?
Another team with questions around its finances in the Premier League is Everton. These questions have been around for all of last season, practically. Under Farhad Moshiri, the team is in financial crisis. We've talked for months about the 777 deal, the way it collapsed, the people behind it, and then Everton fans who'd suffered a lot thought there was salvation through the Friedkin Group, the owners of Roma. And just as we record, that deal has collapsed as well. So the Friedkin Group will still remain involved in Everton, because as part of that mooted takeover, they invested £200 million, effectively taking over a loan by another group called MSP. All very confusing, all very murky, but again, raises doubts about the future of one of the Premier League and English football's great clubs.
Well, as ever, you can message us at Sport Unlocked on X, Facebook and Instagram. But for now, thank you for listening. Goodbye.